I'm Eleanor, his 68-year-old mother, the one who raised him alone. For years, I made excuses for my son's drinking, for his endless need for money. But when I finally said no, he didn't just rage, he beat me and ripped my late husband's wedding ring from my very finger. My boy had become an alcoholic thug, and I faced the most heartbreaking choice a mother can make: protect myself or protect the monster he'd become. This is how I chose. Before I begin my story, I just want to say thank you for listening as I pour my heart out. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I love hearing from you. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me more than you know. And if you'd like to share your story with me, feel free to email it. I'll drop my email in the comments and description below. Now let me tell you what really happened. My little house on Palmer Street used to be filled with laughter. Robert, my dear late husband, had a laugh that could shake the very foundations, a deep booming sound that wrapped around you like a warm blanket. He's been gone 10 years now, and the silence he left behind has a way of amplifying other, less welcome noises. The creak of the floorboards in the empty upstairs bedroom, the drip of a faucet I keep meaning to get fixed, and most persistently, the anxious thrumming of my own heart whenever the phone rings on a Friday afternoon. Fridays are usually when Tony calls, if he calls at all. Tony. My Anthony. My son. 42 years old now, a man grown, yet sometimes when I look at him I still see the bright-eyed boy who used to collect G.I. Joe figures and dream of being an astronaut. Where did that boy go? The man who visits me now, his visits as rare and fleeting as a winter butterfly, carries a different kind of energy, a coiled, restless tension, a scent that's become achingly familiar. It's the sour-sweet tang of stale liquor clinging to his clothes, sometimes faint, sometimes strong enough to make my eyes water, even when he tries to mask it with cheap cologne. His alcoholism, for I could no longer deny it that name, not even in the privacy of my own worried thoughts, had become a greedy shadow consuming him and by extension consuming me. His visits, once a source of joy after Robert passed, had devolved into a painful, predictable charade. He'd arrive with a flurry of forced charm, a quick, distracted hug, his eyes, often bloodshot, even in the morning, darting around the living room as if casing the joint. He'd ask perfunctory questions about my health, my garden, his attention clearly elsewhere. Then, inevitably, would come the real reason for his presence. "Mom," he'd begin, his voice a carefully constructed blend of urgency and casualness. "Things are a bit tight this month. Just a little short on the car payment, you know how it is." Or, "This incredible investment opportunity came up, Mom, a sure thing, but I need to get in on the ground floor and I'm just a few hundred shy." Or increasingly just a blunt, "I need some cash, Mom. 500. Can you help me out?" And I, Eleanor Vance, 68 years old, the woman who had faced down life's storms with what I'd always thought was a decent measure of strength, would find myself reaching for my purse. My savings, the modest nest egg Robert and I had carefully built, had been steadily dwindling, each withdrawal a small, painful surrender. I knew deep down I was enabling him. I knew the money wasn't going to car payments or sure-thing investments. It was vanishing into the same black hole that was swallowing my son, the one that left him with trembling hands in the morning and that desperate, hunted look in his eyes. I tried talking to him, of course. So many times. "Tony, honey," I'd say, my voice gentle, trying to keep the tremor of fear out of it. "Are you all right? You seem distressed. Maybe you should see someone, talk about what's bothering you." His reaction was always the same. A flash of anger, a defensive denial. "I'm fine, Mom. God, can't a guy have a little stress without his mother turning it into a federal case? I just need a bit of help, that's all. Are you going to help me or not?" Sometimes, if he'd been drinking more heavily, his words would be slurred, his temper even shorter, a frightening glimpse of a rage I didn't recognize. The amounts he requested grew larger, his visits shorter, his charm more transparently false. The loving son was disappearing, replaced by a desperate, manipulative stranger who wore his face. I felt like an ATM, a means to an end. The loneliness was a constant ache, a hollow space in my chest that no amount of gardening or rereading Robert's old letters could fill. It wasn't just the absence of Robert. It was the active, painful erosion of my relationship with my only child. He was there, yet he was gone. A knot of fear had taken permanent residence in my stomach. What would happen when the money finally ran out? My savings weren't bottomless. I saw the way he looked at my wedding ring sometimes, the one Robert had slipped on my finger nearly 50 years ago, his eyes lingering on the small, perfect diamond. I'd started hiding my purse when I knew he was coming, a small, shameful act that spoke volumes about the state of our relationship. I remembered Robert's words from long ago when Tony was just a teenager, already a little too fond of a good time, a little too careless with his responsibilities. "You're too soft on him, Ellie," Robert had said, his voice kind but firm. "He needs to learn the weight of his own choices." I'd bristled then, defensive of my boy. Now Robert's words haunted me. Had my softness, my unwavering maternal desire to shield my son from pain, paved the way for this monster of addiction to take root? The what-ifs were a torment. What if I'd been stricter? What if I'd seen the signs earlier? But regret was a luxury I couldn't afford. My fear now was less about the past and more about the terrifyingly uncertain future. Tony's temper was getting worse, his demands more aggressive. The thinly veiled impatience was morphing into something uglier, something that made the hair on the back of my neck prickle. There was a new desperation in him, a recklessness that frightened me. I knew with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones, that a confrontation was coming, a day when my no would finally have to be absolute. And I was terrified of what that day might bring, what my son, in the depths of his addiction and his rage, might be capable of when the well finally, truly ran dry. March 12th. A date etched onto my soul with the indelible ink of grief. 10 years. An entire decade since my Robert had been taken from me, his laughter silenced, his warm presence replaced by a persistent hollow ache in my chest. I'd started the day as I always did on this anniversary, by visiting his grave, laying a small bouquet of his favorite yellow roses, their cheerful color a stark contrast to the gray stone and the even grayer landscape of my heart. I'd spoken to him quietly, told him about my garden, about the leaky faucet I still hadn't fixed, about my worries for Tony. "Oh, Robert, if only you were here, you'd know what to do with our boy." I'd planned a quiet dinner, something simple but nourishing, just for me and Tony. He'd actually promised this time to be there. "Of course, Mom," he'd said on the phone earlier in the week, his voice sounding unusually clear, almost like his old self. "Dad's anniversary. Wouldn't miss it." A tiny, hopeful bird had taken flight in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, he understood. Maybe he needed comfort too. The bird crashed and burned around 7 that evening. Tony finally stumbled through the front door 2 hours late, not with flowers or a word of remembrance for his father, but with the reek of cheap whiskey clinging to him like a shroud. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements jerky, his carefully knotted tie already askew. The clarity I'd heard on the phone was long gone, drowned in whatever bottle he'd found solace in today. "Hey, Mom," he slurred, dropping his keys on the hall table with a clatter. "Sorry I'm late. Got held up. Big deal brewing, you know." He didn't look at Robert's portrait on the mantelpiece, the one where his father smiled out, forever young and vibrant. He didn't seem to register the single lit candle beside it, my small, silent tribute. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Dinner's ready, Tony." I kept it warm. He picked at the food, his agitation a palpable force in the room. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words, with my grief and his, desperation. He barely touched the pot roast Robert had loved, his gaze flitting around the room as if looking for an escape route, or perhaps his next opportunity. It came before I'd even cleared the plates. "Mom," he began, leaning forward, his voice dropping to that familiar wheedling tone that always preceded a demand. "I'm in a bit of a jam. A serious one this time. Some guys I owe. It's gotten heavy. I need $5,000. Tonight." $5,000. The largest sum he'd ever asked for in one go. My heart sank. On this day of all days. The carefully constructed dam of my composure began to crack. "Tony," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. It's the anniversary of your father's passing. And you come here, smelling like a distillery, to ask me for $5,000. His eyes, usually so adept at feigning contrition, hardened. "Oh, here we go," he sneered, his words thick. "The guilt trip. Always the damn guilt trip with you, isn't it? Dad's been gone 10 years, Mom. Life goes on. And my life, right now, needs $5,000, or things are going to get very ugly for me." "And what about my life, Tony?" I asked, a sudden surge of bitterness, of years of swallowed pain rising up. "What about the money your father and I saved for our old age, for emergencies? It's nearly gone, son, because of your jams, your emergencies, that never seem to end. I gestured around the room. This house needs repairs, I need things, but there's never enough because you always need it more. That's when he truly exploded. Fueled by alcohol, by his own self-loathing, by a lifetime of unchecked entitlement, he lurched to his feet, his chair scraping harshly against the wooden floor. For God's sake, Mom, he roared, his face contorted, spittle flying from his lips. It's just damn money. Filthy, useless money. What else are you going to do with it, huh? Sit on it until you croak like some miserable old dragon hoarding gold? I'm your son. Your only son. Baby me. Robert would want me to have it. He wouldn't want you being such a selfish, tight-fisted old age. He punctuated the last vile word by slamming his fist on the dining table, rattling the very china Robert and I had cherished. The air crackled with his rage, with the stench of stale alcohol and his unbridled venom. He cursed again, a string of ugly words I'd never heard him utter as a boy, blaming me, blaming his dead father, blaming the world for his self-inflicted problems. I sat there, frozen not by fear this time but by a sudden deathly calm. The pain was immense, a physical blow that seemed to stop my heart. He had invoked his father's name to justify this desecration. He had called me names I wouldn't repeat to my worst enemy. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about a fundamental absence of love, of respect, of basic human decency. The boy I remembered, the son I had loved and sacrificed for, was well and truly gone, consumed by the alcoholic thug who now stood before me, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with a terrifying empty fury. And in that moment of brutal clarity, something inside me didn't just snap. It fractured and then reformed into something hard, cold, and unyielding. My love for him, the unconditional, all-consuming mother love, didn't vanish, but it was now encased in ice. He was right about one thing. Life does go on. And mine, I decided in that instant, would no longer be a resource for him to plunder, a well of forgiveness for him to endlessly poison. I had to protect what little I had left, including my own sanity and self-respect. I would not be his victim anymore. I would not enable his destruction, nor allow him to complete mine. The path ahead was terrifyingly unclear, but one thing was certain. The Eleanor who had started this day mourning her husband was not the same Eleanor who would end it. A new, grim resolve had taken root in the ashes of my heartbreak. I had to change the locks on my life and he would no longer hold the key. The silence that descended upon my house after Tony stormed out on that dreadful anniversary evening was a heavy, suffocating blanket. His vile words, calling me an old hag, blaming his dead father, still echoed in the rooms where Robert and I had shared so much love. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. For hours I just sat at the dining table, the remnants of the ruined dinner growing cold before me, staring at Robert's portrait. The grief for my husband was now intertwined with a new, sharper grief for the son I had irretrievably lost to the bottle and his own festering bitterness. But beneath the shock and the profound sorrow, the icy resolve that had formed during his tirade didn't thaw. It hardened. He would be back. His addiction, his insatiable need for money would drive him back. And when he came, I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, his rage would be even more terrifying if I dared to refuse him again. The thought of facing that alone, of enduring another onslaught of his alcohol-fueled fury, was unbearable. I was 68 years old. I had survived widowhood, financial struggles, and the loneliness of an empty nest. I would not be terrorized in my own home by my own child. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak of the old house, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't change Tony, not anymore. But I could change how I responded to him. I needed a buffer, a witness, someone who could be a calm presence if, when he exploded again. My old friends, dear as they were mostly my age. I couldn't subject them to Tony's potential violence. I needed professional help, but not for me, not in the way a therapist helps. I needed a different kind of support. My fingers, still a little unsteady, typed in-home companion services into the search bar on Robert's old desktop computer. I'd always been reasonably comfortable with technology, a necessity after Robert passed and I had to manage everything myself. Page after page of smiling caregivers, mostly geared towards medical needs. That wasn't quite it. Then I found it. A smaller local agency called Connections Companionship, specializing in providing social support, conversation, and light assistance for seniors who were otherwise independent but desired company or a bit of help with errands and appointments. Their website stressed discretion and respect. I called them, my voice low, almost conspiratorial, even though I was alone in the house. I explained vaguely that I was a widow and my son was going through a difficult time, and that I sometimes felt a little nervous when he was due to visit. I said I was looking for someone calm and sensible to simply be present in the house for a few hours, a couple of times a week, perhaps more if needed, particularly when I was expecting him. The agency manager, a kind-voiced woman named Mrs. Albright, was understanding. She asked a few gentle questions about my preferences. I said I wanted someone mature but not necessarily elderly, articulate, and, above all, someone with a calm demeanor. She said she had just the person in mind, a young woman named Chloe Jordan, who was well liked by her other clients for her gentle nature and good sense. Chloe Jordan arrived for an introductory meeting 2 days later. She was 28 with warm, intelligent eyes and a handshake that was surprisingly firm and reassuring. She wasn't what I expected. I'd pictured someone older, perhaps. But there was an immediate sense of quiet capability about her, a professionalism that put me at ease. She listened patiently as I, carefully omitting the rawest details of Tony's verbal abuse and alcoholism, explained that my son had become somewhat volatile due to personal pressures, and that his visits, which were usually about him needing financial assistance, often left me feeling very stressed and vulnerable. "I've decided, Miss Jordan," I said, my voice gaining a little strength as I spoke my intention aloud, "that I can no longer provide that financial assistance. And I am concerned about how he will react when I tell him. I would feel much more secure having someone else present." Chloe nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I understand, Mrs. Vance. My role would be to provide a calm, supportive presence for you. If your son becomes agitated, I would not intervene directly unless you were in clear physical danger, but I can certainly be a witness, and I can help you call for assistance if needed. We can also discuss a safety plan, perhaps a signal between us if you feel a situation is escalating." A safety plan. The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of what my relationship with my son had become. But Chloe's sensible, matter-of-fact approach was oddly comforting. She wasn't treating me like a hysterical old woman. She was treating me like a client with a legitimate concern who was taking practical steps to address it. Over the next week, Chloe started her visits. We settled into an easy routine. She'd read to me sometimes as my eyes tired easily now. We'd chat about current events, her studies, she was taking some online courses, my garden. She helped me organize Robert's old papers, a task I'd been putting off for years, her presence making the bittersweet journey through memory more bearable. She never pried, never offered unsolicited advice, but she was an excellent listener, and her quiet companionship began to fill some of the lonely spaces in my days. More importantly, her presence began to act as a fragile shield for my resolve. Knowing Chloe would be there the next time Tony came, a calm witness to whatever transpired, gave me a sliver of courage I hadn't possessed before. We did discuss a simple safety plan. If Tony's anger escalated beyond verbal abuse, if I felt genuinely threatened, I would use a prearranged phrase. "Perhaps Robert's old walking stick is in the hall closet, Chloe?" And she would immediately call for help from her cell phone, then if possible try to de-escalate or remove me from the room. The dread of Tony's next visit was still a cold knot in my stomach. The thought of his face contorting in that alcohol-fueled rage, of the vile words he might spew, still made my hands tremble. But now there was something else too. A flicker of determination. I wasn't entirely alone anymore. I had an ally, however professional and discreet. I had a plan, however fragile. The cash flow was going to stop. And I, Eleanor Vance, was going to stand my ground, come what may. The storm was coming, I knew it. But this time I wouldn't face it entirely defenseless. The week after I hired Chloe Jordan was a strange interlude of borrowed calm before the inevitable storm. Chloe came 3 afternoons, her presence a quiet reassurance. We talked, we gardened a little, she helped me sort through some old photographs. But beneath the surface of our pleasantries, the dread of Tony's next appearance coiled in my stomach like a venomous snake. I knew he'd be back, his addiction a relentless master. I'd given him no indication that the Bank of Mom was closed for business, not yet. That conversation, I knew, would be the true test of my newfound resolve, and Chloe's presence my only shield. It was a Tuesday, just a little over a week since his disgusting tirade on Robert's anniversary. The doorbell rang mid-afternoon, sharp and impatient. My heart leaped into my throat. Chloe, who was helping me repot an orchid, gave me a steady, questioning look. I nodded grimly. "That will be my son," I said, my voice betraying a tremor I couldn't quite control. Chloe simply placed a reassuring hand on my arm for a moment before moving to a nearby armchair with her book. A silent, steadfast presence. I opened the door to Tony. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. His eyes were bloodshot and darting, his expensive shirt rumpled and stained. He smelled strongly of stale alcohol and desperation. He pushed past me into the living room without a word of greeting, his gaze already scanning the room as if assessing its contents for pawn value. "Mom," he began, his voice raspy, urgent. "I need money. No. 2,000. No questions, just give it to me." This was it. I took a deep breath, Chloe's quiet presence in the corner of my eye a small anchor. "Anthony," I said, my voice surprisingly firm, "I can't give you any more money. There isn't any more to give for these emergencies of yours. I've had to reevaluate my own finances." He stared at me, his jaw slack with disbelief. For a moment he looked like that little boy I used to scold for tracking mud into the house, bewildered that the rules had suddenly changed. Then his face contorted. The alcoholic rage I had witnessed on Robert's anniversary returned, but this time, it was 1,000 times more terrifying, more unhinged. "No more money?" he spat, advancing on me. "What the hell do you mean, no more money? Are you senile? It's my money too, you old." He let loose a string of curses that made my ears burn, vile words I never thought I'd hear from my own child. "You're just being a spiteful old bitch because I told you the truth last week." "Tony, please," I said, backing away, my hand instinctively going to the walker beside my chair. "I don't have it. And even if I did, I can't keep funding this." I gestured vaguely, unable to bring myself to name his addiction in the face of such fury. Chloe, bless her brave heart, stood up slowly. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Perhaps you should leave and come back when you're feeling less agitated." Tony whirled on her, his eyes blazing. "And who the hell are you?" he roared. "My mother's new keeper? Mind your own damn business or I'll—" Before he could finish his threat, before I could even utter our prearranged safety phrase about Robert's walking stick, he lunged. Not at Chloe but at me. He didn't punch me, not then, but he shoved me with all his considerable force. I cried out, stumbling backwards, my bad knee giving way. I would have crashed to the floor if not for the walker, which I gripped with a desperate strength, pain shooting up my leg. Chloe rushed forward. "Mrs. Vance. Stop it, Mr. Vance. You're hurting her." He turned his rage on Chloe then, swatting her arm away with a vicious backhand. "Get out of my way, you little parasite," he screamed, and then he shoved her too hard, sending her stumbling against a bookshelf, books cascading to the floor. The sight of him hurting Chloe, this kind young woman who was only trying to help, broke through my fear. "Anthony, stop it," I shrieked. "You're acting like a madman. A thug." My words seemed to fuel his fury further. His eyes, wild and unfocused, scanned the room like a cornered animal. And then they landed on my dressing table, on the small antique jewelry box that had been my mother's. He strode towards it, a terrible, predatory grin twisting his lips. "No money, huh, Mom?" he sneered. "We'll just see about that." He snatched up the box, fumbling with the clasp. I tried to get to him to stop him, but my knee buckled. "Tony, no. Those were your grandmother's." He ignored me, dumping the contents onto the bed. My few precious pieces, a string of pearls Robert had given me, some old brooches. And then he saw it on my hand, the hand still gripping the walker. My wedding ring. Robert's ring. Simple gold, but it held 50 years of love and memories. He lunged for my hand. I cried out, trying to pull away, but he was too strong, his grip like iron. He twisted my fingers, pain lancing up my arm. "Give it to me, old woman," he snarled, his face inches from mine, his breath reeking of alcohol. With a brutal yank he wrenched the ring from my finger. The skin tore and I screamed, a raw sound of agony and violation. He didn't even look at my bleeding hand. He pocketed the ring, scooped up the other jewelry from the bed, and with one last hateful glare at me and a terrified Chloe, he turned and fled the house, the front door slamming behind him like a gunshot. I sank into my chair, cradling my throbbing, bleeding finger. The place where Robert's ring had been a cold, empty ache. Chloe, pale but composed, rushed to my side, her own arm already showing a red mark where he'd hit her. The room was a mess, a testament to his violent passage. But it was nothing compared to the devastation in my heart. He had beaten me. Not just with words this time, but with his hands. He had terrorized a young woman who was only trying to help. And he had stolen the most sacred symbol of my life with his father. The cash had run out. And my son, my alcoholic, thuggish son, had shown me exactly who he had become. The slam of the front door as Tony fled echoed the violent shattering of my world. For a long moment, neither Chloe nor I moved, the air thick with shock and the metallic scent of fear. My hand throbbed, a raw, bleeding reminder where Robert's ring had been a comforting presence for half a century. Chloe, bless her, was the first to break the spell, her professionalism kicking in despite the tremor in her voice and the angry red mark blooming on her own arm where Tony had struck her. "Mrs. Vance. Eleanor, are you badly hurt?" she asked gently, helping me to sit, her eyes scanning me for injuries. "We need to call the police. Right now. And an ambulance for your hand, it looks nasty." Police. The word itself felt like another blow. My son. My Anthony. Turning him over to the police? The shame, the finality of it was a terrifying abyss. "No," I whispered, clutching my injured hand. "No police. Not yet." Chloe, he took Robert's ring. It's all I have left of him, really. He wouldn't. But even as I said it, I knew. The wild, desperate look in Tony's eyes, the way he'd snatched it, there was no sentimentality there, only a raw, ugly need. Chloe was firm but kind. She cleaned and bandaged my finger, which was already swelling, took photos of my injuries and her own, and documented the ransacked state of my bedroom with a grim efficiency on her phone. "Eleanor," she said softly but with an undercurrent of steel, "what he did was a serious assault. And robbery. He needs to be held accountable. For your safety and for mine." I knew she was right. Every rational part of me knew it. But the mother in me, the one who had cradled that boy, who had mended his scraped knees and soothed his childhood fears, still recoiled from the idea of seeing him in handcuffs, his future destroyed. Just give me a little time, Chloe," I pleaded. "Let me try to talk to him first. Maybe he'll bring it back if he calms down." He was drunk, not himself. Even as I spoke the words, they tasted like ash in my mouth. Later that evening, my heart a leaden weight, I called Tony's phone. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I left a tearful, quavering message. "Anthony's mom. Please, Tony, the ring. It was your father's. It means everything to me. Just bring back the ring, son. We don't have to make this worse than it is. Please." He didn't call back. I texted, the words blurring through my tears. "Tony, I'm begging you. Your father's ring. I won't call anyone if you just bring it back." His reply, when it finally came hours later, was a single chillingly dismissive text. "Chill out, Mom. It's just a ring. I needed the cash. Upset my stomach with all your drama. Just a ring." My stomach churned with a fresh wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my surgery. He'd already sold it. Robert's ring, melted down or sitting in some grubby pawn shop window, traded for a pittance to fuel his addictions. The callousness of it, the utter lack of remorse or understanding for the pain he'd inflicted, was a deeper wound than my bleeding finger. The next few days were a torment of grief and indecision. Chloe was a constant, quiet support, respecting my anguished paralysis while gently reminding me that Tony was a danger. She made sure I ate, helped me with my continued recovery, and meticulously kept notes on everything. My home, once my sanctuary, felt violated, unsafe. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. I slept with my bedroom door locked, something I hadn't done since Robert was away on his last business trip. The physical bruises on my arm and Chloe's began to fade, but the invisible ones on my soul only deepened. Then on the fourth day after the assault, my phone rang. It was Tony. My heart leaped with a desperate, foolish hope. Maybe he was calling to apologize, to say he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd found a way to get the ring back. "Mom." His voice was gruff, impatient, with that familiar undercurrent of alcohol. "Tony," I breathed, clutching the phone. Did you get it back?" "Get what back?" he snapped. "Look, I'm in another bind. Those guys I told you about, they're on my back again. I need another 1,000. And don't start with the waterworks this time. Just get it for me. I was so stunned I couldn't speak. Another 1,000? After he had assaulted me, terrorized Chloe, stolen from me, pawned the most sacred object I possessed? After all that, he had the audacity to call and demand more money, as if nothing had happened, as if I were still his personal bank, obligated to fund his destructive life. There were no apologies, no remorse, no mention of the ring, just that same raw, aggressive entitlement. The last fragile thread of maternal hope, the one that had kept me from dialing 911, finally, irrevocably snapped. He wasn't just lost to his addiction, he was lost to basic humanity. He felt nothing for me beyond what I could provide. He was, as the title of this sad chapter of my life would one day read, an alcoholic thug. And he would continue to hurt me, to hurt others, as long as he faced no consequences. My voice, when I finally found it, was cold, devoid of the warmth he had taken for granted and then so brutally extinguished. Anthony, I said, each word an icicle. There will be no more money. Not now. Not ever. Before he could unleash the torrent of abuse I knew was coming, I ended the call. I looked at Chloe, who had been listening with a pained expression. My eyes were dry, my resolve absolute. Chloe dear, I said, my voice steady now. I think it's time we paid a visit to the police station. It seems my son needs to learn that actions have consequences. The phone clattered from my numb fingers onto its cradle. Tony's voice, raw with that familiar alcoholic aggression and laced with threats, still echoed in the quiet room. More money. After everything. After the assault, the terror, the theft of Robert's ring, the sacred symbol of a love he clearly held in no regard, he still had the audacity to demand more, as if I were nothing more than a faulty machine that had temporarily stopped dispensing cash. Chloe looked at me, her young face etched with a mixture of pity and a steely anger I was beginning to recognize in myself. Eleanor, she said softly, you know what you have to do now, don't you? He won't stop. Not unless he's made to. And in that moment, the last vestiges of my maternal instinct to shield him, to protect the memory of the boy he once was, finally crumbled into dust. He wasn't that boy. He was a 42-year-old man, an alcoholic, a thief, and yes, a thug who had beaten his own mother and her companion. My love couldn't save him. My money was only killing him faster and destroying me in the process. The cash flow had to be cut not just from my bank account but from his life by forces greater than my own weakening will. Yes, Chloe, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, though a chasm of grief had opened within me. I know exactly what I have to do. The visit to the police station was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Chloe came with me, her presence a silent pillar of support. She had her meticulously documented notes, the photographs of our bruises, the list of stolen jewelry, the estimated value. I remember sitting before a kind-faced but weary-looking detective, a woman named Miller, and recounting the events of that horrific afternoon, my voice trembling at first, then gaining a grim strength as I detailed Tony's rage, the assault, the way he'd wrenched Robert's ring from my finger. I laid bare my son's alcoholism, his escalating aggression, his final unrepentant demand for more money after desecrating his father's memory. I was reporting my own child for assault, battery, and grand larceny. Each word felt like a betrayal of my motherhood, yet also, paradoxically, the truest act of love I had left to give him, the brutal love that demands accountability. Detective Miller listened patiently, her expression growing more serious with each detail. Chloe corroborated my story, her account clear and precise. The evidence Chloe had gathered was invaluable. By the end of our statement, a warrant was being drawn up for Anthony Vance Jr. They arrested him later that day at the seedy motel he'd apparently been frequenting. I wasn't there to see it, and for that I was grateful. Detective Miller called to inform me. Hearing the words, "He's in custody, Mrs. Vance," brought not a sense of triumph, but a wave of profound, gut-wrenching sadness. This was my son, the baby I had held, the boy whose future I had prayed for. And I had just set in motion the events that would likely lead him to a prison cell. But beneath the sorrow, there was also a sliver of something else. A grim, reluctant peace. The immediate threat was gone. I had finally protected myself. The days that followed were a blur of legalities, more statements, and the dawning reality of what I had done. Some distant family members, when word got out, whispered their disapproval. How could a mother do that to her own son? But those who knew even a fraction of what I'd endured, those who had seen Tony's decline, offered quiet support. Chloe was my rock, ensuring I ate, attending appointments with me, her calm strength a constant reassurance. The police did their best to trace Robert's ring, but the pawn shop owner Tony had dealt with was uncooperative, the trail cold. The ring, like so much of my past with Tony, was likely gone forever, a permanent scar. The other jewelry, mostly costume pieces with more sentimental than monetary value, was also unrecoverable. Tony faced the charges. His court-appointed lawyer tried to paint him as a victim of circumstance, a troubled man needing help, not jail. But the evidence of the assault, Chloe's unwavering testimony, and his history of financial demands, coupled with the clear callousness of his actions, painted a different picture. He was an alcoholic, yes, but he was also a thug who had terrorized and robbed his elderly mother. The cash flow from me was well and truly severed, not by my refusal alone, but by the bars of the county jail where he awaited trial. My life slowly began to find a new, scarred rhythm. The fear of Tony's sudden appearances, his angry demands, receded. My home, once a place of anxiety, started to feel like a sanctuary again, albeit one haunted by painful memories. I changed the locks, installed a better security system with Chloe's help. The bruises faded from my skin, but the ones on my heart I knew would linger. There was no joy in Tony's downfall, no sense of vindictive pleasure. Only a profound sadness for the man he had become and the son I had lost long before I called the police. My act of reporting him wasn't revenge in the fiery, triumphant way some might imagine. It was the last, most painful act of a desperate mother trying to stop a runaway train, even if it meant derailing her own heart in the process. It was the ultimate cutting off, not just of money, but of the enabling that had allowed his darkness to flourish. My peace is hard-won, paid for with a currency of tears and a mother's broken dreams. But it is peace nonetheless. I am Eleanor Vance. I survived. And in choosing to protect myself, in choosing to finally say no more to my alcoholic, thuggish son, I reclaimed not just my safety but myself. And that, I suppose, is its own quiet, resilient